You know that moment when you're walking down a hospital corridor, carrying a medication tray, and you hear a name that makes you freeze in place? That's exactly what happened to me on a Thursday night, on the 8th floor of St. Michael's Medical Center, where only people with serious money or serious connections get admitted. I'm Marina, and I've been a nurse for over 12 years now. I've seen just about everything in this profession. But what went down that night shook me to my core in a way that even emergency surgeries never could. The patient in room 804 was Patricia Henderson-Ross. Yeah, those Rosses. The family that owns half the commercial real estate in Manhattan. The woman had just had some cosmetic surgery. Nothing major, just what she called maintenance, with that casual tone of someone used to having the best of everything. Ocean view room, Egyptian cotton sheets, even the damn TV remote looked like it cost more than my car. Patricia was elegant in that old money way, you know? Perfectly styled blonde hair even after anesthesia, flawless manicure, skin like porcelain. Early 40s but could pass for 30. Her husband, Edward Ross, showed up every day around 5 p.m., always in a tailored suit, always with that magazine cover smile. Brought expensive flowers, stayed 30 minutes, kissed her forehead, and left. Picture-perfect marriage material. But that Thursday, administration called my station asking me to prep room 806 in a hurry. Private patient, last-minute admission needed total privacy. When I got the intake form, I almost dropped the phone. Julia Martinez, 28 years old. Postpartum complications. The name meant nothing to me. But when she arrived in a wheelchair, pale as a ghost, holding a tiny baby who couldn't have been more than a few months old, something in my chest tightened. I can't explain it. Nurse's intuition, maybe. That woman had fear in her eyes, not fear of illness. A different kind of terror altogether. I got her settled in 806, right next door to Patricia. The luxury rooms at St. Michael's are separated by just a double wall, soundproofed. But if you press your ear against it, well, you can hear something. I'd never done that before. Until that night. Julia asked me to leave the baby in the bassinet beside her bed. Beautiful little boy with huge eyes. I asked if she needed me to call someone, if she had family coming. "There's nobody," she said, and her voice cracked. "Just me and Miguel." Miguel. The baby's name was Miguel. I did the routine procedures, checking vital signs, logging everything in her chart. She had severe anemia, low blood pressure, needed complete rest and observation. I left her to rest and headed back to the corridor. That's when Edward Ross showed up. Earlier than usual, he walked right past the reception desk, didn't even look at me, and went straight into Patricia's room. Nothing strange about that. Husband visiting wife, right? Except 15 minutes later, I heard room 806's door open. I looked down the corridor and nearly choked. Edward was stepping out of Julia's room. He closed the door slowly, looked both ways like he didn't want to be seen, and rushed back to Patricia's room. My heart was pounding. What the hell was happening here? I stood at the nurse's station trying to process it. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he'd walked into the wrong room. Maybe... Then the reception phone rang. It was Julia, asking for help changing the baby. I entered her room and could tell immediately. She'd been crying. Red eyes, swollen nose. She tried to hide it, but couldn't. "Everything okay?" I asked while helping with Miguel. She nodded, but I knew it wasn't. Nurses can sense these things. "Look," I said quietly. "I don't know what's going on, but if you need to talk, I'm here. For real." Julia looked at me with those tear-filled eyes and took a deep breath. "Marina. That's Marina, right? Your badge says so." She wiped away a tear that fell. "Do you know the patient next door?" My stomach dropped. "I do," I said slowly. "Why?" She looked at the baby, then back at me. Because her husband is my son's father. Boom. There it was. I was speechless. Completely speechless. This couldn't be real. Not Edward Ross, with his TV commercial smile. Not here, with his wife 2 feet away. How long? Was all I could manage to ask. 10 years. Her voice was barely a whisper. He met me when I was an intern at his company. Promised he'd leave her. Said he loved me. That Patricia only existed for appearances, for business. I believed him. Stupid, right? 10 years. A whole damn decade of lies. And the baby? I asked, looking at Miguel. Conceived during one of those business trips he's always taking. Except this time, I got pregnant. When I told him, "You know what happened?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. He offered me money, lots of money, to disappear, to never show my face again. I felt anger rising in my throat. And you accepted? No. I wanted to have my son, alone, if I had to. But then I had complications during delivery, and I guess he felt guilty. Had me admitted here. Paid for everything, but put me right next to his wife's room. She looked at the wall like she could see through it. I don't know if it was cruelty or stupidity. I took her hand. Listen, Julia, you don't deserve this. Nobody does. I know, she whispered. But now I have a son to raise. Alone. While she pointed at the wall. She doesn't suspect a thing. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the corridor. Edward was coming back. I looked at Julia. She looked at me. Without saying anything, I left the room and went straight to the nurse's station. He walked past me like I was invisible. Went into 804, stayed another 30 minutes, and left. When the elevator closed, I went back to Julia's room. Does he know you're here? I asked. He knows. He's the one who chose the room. The coldness of that gave me chills. The rest of the night was brutal. I couldn't stop thinking about the whole situation. 2 women, 1 wall between them, 1 man deceiving them both. But only one of them didn't know anything. Patricia called around 11 at night asking for chamomile tea. I entered her room and found her sitting in the armchair, looking gorgeous even post-op, reading a design magazine. "Marina, dear," she said in that soft voice of someone born into wealth. "You've worked here long?" 12 years, Mrs. Ross." "Wow, that's quite a while. So you must have seen everything, right?" She smiled. "Drama, affairs, secrets." I almost choked on my own spit. Did she know? "Hospital life is intense," was all I could manage. "I imagine." She sighed, closing the magazine. "You know, Marina, I've always had a very sheltered life. My parents raised me to marry well, to keep up appearances. And that's what I did. Married Edward 15 years ago. He's a good husband, provider, attentive when needed. Never let me lack for anything. I stayed quiet, just listening. But she hesitated, looking at her wedding ring. Sometimes I feel like something's missing. A real connection, you know? That thing where you look to the side and know the person is there out of love, not convenience. My heart ached. How was I supposed to tell her that her husband had a mistress for 10 years and a months-old baby in the next room? "Mrs. Ross," I started, choosing my words carefully. "Have you ever talked to Edward about this?" She laughed, but it was a sad laugh. "Talk? About feelings?" "Marina, my marriage doesn't work that way. We talk about trips, about renovations, about our social calendar, but about what really matters." She shook her head. "Never." I brought her tea and went back to the corridor. My head was exploding. This whole situation was a ticking time bomb, and I was right in the middle of it. Around 3 in the morning, I heard a sound coming from Julia's room. Quiet crying, muffled. I knocked and entered. She was sitting on the bed, Miguel sleeping in the bassinet, tears streaming down her face. He came by earlier, she told me. Stayed 10 minutes. Said he'll increase the child support, but I need to leave the city. That it's better for everyone. Better for him, you mean? Yeah. She wiped her face. You know what hurts the most, Marina? It's not even the cheating. It's that for all those years I really thought he loved me. That we were this beautiful secret hidden away. That someday we'd be able to live this openly. But now I see. He never wanted that. I was always disposable. I sat on the edge of her bed. You're not disposable. You're the mother of a beautiful baby. You're strong. You survived all this. And you'll keep surviving, with or without him. She looked at me with those tired eyes. How do you do it, Marina? How do you care for so many broken people and still have hope? I took a deep breath. Because I've seen people rise from the ashes, Julia. I've seen parents lose children and find the strength to keep going. I've seen marriages fall apart and people rebuild their lives from scratch. The pain exists. There's no escaping it. But it's not eternal. And you're going to get through this. And you know what? If you're following this story with me, feeling all of this, then let me ask you something from the bottom of my heart. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Because these stories, these experiences I share with you, they're about this, about the raw, unfiltered truth of life. And I need you here with me, commenting, sharing your own experiences. Because we heal together, you understand? Every comment I read strengthens me, and I know it strengthens you too. So stay with me until the end of this story, because what comes next changed everything. Friday morning, bright and early, I came in for my shift and found the medical team all worked up. Patricia was being discharged that day. Doctors cleared her. Everything looked good with her recovery. I knew what that meant. She'd leave without knowing anything. Edward would continue his double life. Julia would be pushed away, and this whole charade would go on. Something inside me screamed that this was wrong. Very wrong. But I couldn't do anything. It wasn't my place. Or was it? I went to check Julia's vitals and found her awake, looking out the window. Miguel was sleeping peacefully in the bassinet. She's leaving today, Julia said, not taking her eyes off the view. I know. And I'll be here another 2 days, long enough for her to disappear from my life again. She finally looked at me. Marina, do you think I should tell her? I froze. What? The truth. About Edward, about Miguel, about everything. Julia, I started, but she cut me off. I know. It's not my job to destroy her marriage. But isn't it her right to know who she's married to? Doesn't she deserve to choose whether she wants to stay in this lie or not? I had no answer for that. The morning dragged on. Patricia was being prepped for discharge, signing papers, organizing her things. Edward had called saying he'd arrive at noon to pick her up. Everything neat. Everything according to plan. Julia, in the next room, was nursing Miguel in silence. I kept going back and forth between the two rooms, doing my job, but with this weight on my chest, the feeling that something needed to happen. It was 11:30 when things spiraled out of control. I was at the nurse's station when I heard something fall in Julia's room. I ran there and found her passed out on the floor, Miguel crying in the bassinet. I hit the emergency button. The team arrived in seconds. She'd fainted from the anemia. Her blood pressure had crashed. We got her back in bed, checked everything. She came to a bit dizzy. But Miguel's crying was loud. Very loud. And that's when the door opened. Patricia walked into the room. I froze. Everyone froze. She was in her robe, all put together, ready to leave. Must have heard the baby crying and came to see what was wrong. Because St. Michael's might be an elite hospital, but a mother's a mother. None of them can ignore a crying baby. "Did something happen?" Patricia asked, looking at Julia in the bed, at the doctors, at me. "Just a fainting spell, Mrs. Ross," I replied quickly, already under control. But Patricia wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at Miguel. She walked to the bassinet slowly, like she was hypnotized, looked down, and her face changed. "This baby," she whispered. "How old?" Julia, still pale in bed, answered with a weak voice. 3 months. Patricia picked up Miguel without asking, rocked him, looked at that tiny face, and I saw the exact moment she understood. The eyes, the shape of his face, the mouth. Miguel was the spitting image of Edward. "Who are you?" Patricia asked Julia, and her voice was shaking. Julia closed her eyes, took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there were tears there. "My name is Julia, and this baby is your husband's son." The silence that fell in that room was deafening. Patricia stood still, holding Miguel, processing it all. The doctors looked at each other, not knowing what to do. I wanted to disappear. "How long?" Patricia finally asked. 10 years. The answer fell like a bomb. Patricia carefully put Miguel back in the bassinet, like he was made of glass. Then she turned to Julia. 10 years. You were my husband's mistress for 10 years. I didn't know at first, Julia tried to explain, her voice failing. When I found out he was married, I was already too involved. He said your marriage was just for show, that there was no love anymore, that he'd leave. Patricia laughed, that cold laugh with no humor whatsoever. Leave. He told you that? She shook her head. And you believed him. I was young, naive, in love, and now you have his child. I do. Patricia walked to the window, hugged herself, stood looking outside for long seconds. When she turned back, there was a firmness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Where did he put you? She asked. Apartment? House? Apartment. Upper West Side. Does he pay child support? He's going to start. Patricia nodded, processing each piece of information like she was putting together a puzzle. And do you love him? The question caught Julia off guard. I did. Very much. But now I just want to raise my son in peace. Your son, Patricia repeated. The son he had with you while I was doing IVF, while I was begging God to give me a baby, while I went through painful treatments, injections, crushed hopes. My heart broke. I didn't know about that. Julia covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. I didn't know. He never told me. Of course he didn't tell you. Patricia exploded, and for the first time her voice rose. Because if you knew I was desperately trying to have a child with him, maybe you would have thought twice before spreading your legs. The silence returned, heavy. Patricia took a deep breath, controlling her rage. I'm sorry, she said, quieter. That was cruel. It's not your fault I couldn't get pregnant. No, Julia cried. It wasn't. But it was my fault for believing his lies, for being so stupid, for thinking I was special. The two women looked at each other. 2 lives destroyed by the same man. 1 wall apart for 3 days, and neither of them knew. That's when the door opened again. Edward Ross walked into the room and stood completely frozen, seeing his wife there, standing, looking at his mistress in the bed and his son in the bassinet. Patricia, he started, but she raised her hand. No. 1 word, just one. He tried again. Let me explain. "There's nothing to explain, Edward. It's all very clear." She walked past him without looking, left the room and went straight to hers. Edward stood there, looking at Julia, then at me, completely lost. "You caused this," I said quietly. "Now deal with it." He ran after Patricia. What happened next was a mix of chaos and silence. Edward tried to talk to Patricia, but she locked the room door from inside. Called her lawyer right there from the hospital. Asked administration to move her to a different room, away from all of it. Julia stayed in 806, quiet, taking care of Miguel. I'd go in there from time to time to check her vitals, and I'd see in her eyes a mix of relief and guilt. "I didn't want it to be like this," she told me during one of those visits. "I know. But I think it was better. She deserved to know." She did. 2 days later, Julia was discharged. Edward didn't show up anymore. Sent a driver to pick her and Miguel up, along with an envelope full of cash. Julia looked at me before leaving. "Thank you, Marina, for everything. For listening. For not judging. You're going to be okay," I said, squeezing her hand. "You and Miguel are going to be okay." "I hope so." She left, and I never heard from her again. Patricia left the hospital that same day, but through a different door. Without Edward. Without the expensive flowers. Without the magazine cover smile. Just her, designer bag on her shoulder, and a look I'll never forget. A look of someone who woke up. A few months later, I read it in the paper. Multi-million-dollar divorce. Patricia Henderson-Ross got half of everything. Half the buildings, half the companies, half the fortune. And Edward? Well, Edward got the bill for his choices. This story shook me deeply, because I saw two women, so different from each other, being deceived by the same man. One lived in the lie without knowing. The other lived in the lie thinking it was truth. And in the end, it was a hospital, a thin wall, and a crying baby that revealed everything. Sometimes I wonder, how many Patricias are out there, living facade marriages without knowing? How many Julias believe in empty promises from men who'll never leave their wives? How many Edwards go on with their double, triple lives, thinking they'll never get caught? The truth is that sooner or later, life presents the bill. It could be in a room mix-up at the hospital. It could be a chance encounter on the street. It could be a DNA test. But the truth always comes out. And when it does, it doesn't come alone. It brings pain, anger, disappointment. But it also brings clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the first step to freedom. I don't know what happened to Patricia after that. Don't know if she rebuilt her life, if she found someone real, if she got the child she wanted so badly. I hope so. I hope she found peace. And Julia? Well, I hope she raised Miguel far from all that mess. That she found real love, someone who valued her. That she learned she was never disposable. That she always deserved more. Because in the end, Marina Silva, night shift nurse, learned an important lesson that week. Secrets might seem to protect, but actually, they imprison. And the truth, however painful, is always the path to freedom. If this story touched your heart in any way, know that you're not alone. We all carry our own battles, our fears, our doubts. But that's exactly why stories like this need to be told and heard. If you know someone who needs to hear this message of hope, share this video. Sometimes one story can be the light someone needs to keep going. And if you have your own story to tell, leave it here in the comments. This space is ours. It's safe. And every word matters. I read every comment, and I know many of you also read and find strength in each other's experiences. See you in the next video with another story that will move your heart. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of those you love, and remember, life is always worth it. A warm hug, and until next time.